Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm your venerable host Orochi, and today we are going to do another deep dive on a class for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Today we're going to take another one of the classes I believe to be a staple of the system that's just generally good. You usually want them in one of your parties, the Barbarian. Barbarian has thematically a lot of rather negative connotations. This is the rage class. That's all you got to think about it. It's just the beat down rage class. If you want to do damage, this is the class you take, because that's what they specialize in. They are the only martial class who gives up even their baseline mediocre martial defense of medium armor and take on a penalty to AC so that they can do extra damage. And I would say from experience in running a game that had a barbarian in it up to, I think we got to 8th level or so, the barbarian's damage far exceeds like what most other classes can do, to a point where I've heard a lot of people say that the problem with Pathfinder 1 is that combat became rocket tag. Everyone's offense was so much greater than everyone's defense, and that they like that Pathfinder 2 is more measured between both monsters and PCs. But then, having run a game with the Barbarian, I feel like that's what the Barbarian's playstyle is that they lower their defense to get more offense. They absolutely wreck enemies, but as soon as they start coming up against on-level or boss-level threats, they can quickly crumple, and just getting hit more and getting crit more and taking huge chunks of damage can be massively demoralizing to the player. So I think that's something important to keep in mind if somebody in your group is going to choose the Barbarian, because you got to make sure that they understand is like, in general, the system makes it so that when you fight bosses, higher level enemies, they're going to have greater chances to hit you and greater chances to crit you. And so then if you play something like a Barbarian, that's going to just be expanded upon even greater, and that might not be a trade you're willing to make, especially as a new character. But as long as you, especially in the right party, who can, like with a champion or something, like their damage is going to be definitely worth any amount of extra vulnerability you give. Because let's look at their core mechanic. Rage. Requirements: you aren't fatigued or raging. You tap into your inner fury to begin raging. You gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your level plus your constitution modifier, which is, it's alright. It's not great, but it's alright. This frenzy lasts for 1 minute until there are no enemies you can perceive, or until you fall unconscious, whichever comes first. So, if there's an enemy flying above you, you can't stop raging. You can't get to them. You can't do anything about it, but you can't stop raging, which most of the time probably won't be an issue, but it does bring back a little bit of the flavor of the Berserker from 3rd edition, which I rather liked, even though it was terribly balanced. Because you can't voluntarily stop raging. While raging, you deal 2 additional damage with melee weapons and unarmed attacks. This additional damage is halved if your weapon or unarmed attack is agile. That's a big thing to know. And 2 might not seem a lot, but that's just the minimum. Everything else about this will increase that. And you take a -1 penalty to AC, which isn't huge, but it's noticeable. And there is a way to make it even worse. You can't use actions with the concentrate trait unless they also have the rage trait. You can seek while raging. This puts it off so you can't do spell casting and a bunch of other things as well. After you stop raging, you lose any remaining temporary hit points from rage, and you can't rage again for 1 minute. So it's a 1 minute on, 1 minute off kind of thing. And then you get to choose what flavor of rager you want to be. We're going to start down at the bottom here because these are the worst ones. I'm not going to go into huge detail on these, but you can look at the way the damage scales. Goes from 2 to 4, which almost all of them do at first level. That's just the baseline is actual 4 damage, not 2. And then it doubles to 8. And then that's it. So low damage. And it's got all this anti-magic casting kind of weirdness. Which I haven't read all of this or any of their other feats or anything, but from what I've heard is like it's not good. It's like a super niche kind of thing where, hey, if you're playing in a campaign where you're going to get use of the niche things this gives you all the time, like fighting against mage guilds all the time or whatever, then this you'll get use out of it. But as a general use kind of thing, not good. Same with this. This one's against casters, this one's against undead. But pretty much the exact same kind of problems. But you get up to 13 damage in this one. So it's more damage. But anyhow, on to the most powerful one. Giant. You use oversized weapons, which is just theme. It's not actual mechanic. They sort of tried to make it a mechanic, but because of some of the underlying ways that Pathfinder 2 is designed, it can't be a mechanic. Because they're like, oh, giant weapons are just proper weapons sized for the person who uses them, so they're just normal weapons for that person. And so then they just went, oh, so when a smaller barbarian uses them, they do greater damage. But that greater damage is just built into your rage effect, not anything tied to the actual weapon, which I understand why they did that, but Pathfinder 2 has a lot of problems of vermicitude, where it's just like, it is very much not a simulation, which in a few ways is good, but in a lot of ways it's like, well, I'm trying to imagine my character living in this world, and when you have all these video gamey mechanics, which I think is funny that both D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2nd Edition have a lot of video game mechanics, and that was something a lot of people said that they hated about 4th Edition, and so to see all those things just come back in the next iteration and have those iterations be super popular, I think is hilarious. People just don't understand that they're eating all the things that they said they hated and going, oh, this is fine. And it just, that's a whole thing. I could go into a lot of 4E comparisons because I liked 4th Edition, and every time I talk to people who didn't like 4th Edition, their reasons are always really dumb. Like, 4th Edition had tons of problems, but I've never seen anybody who sees the problems that I had in it, and it's funny. So, if it breaks your immersion that you're using a giant weapon and it doesn't technically do anything for you, and you can't use any of these other instincts and use a giant weapon, even though you're super strong badass guy and you would think, hey, that's something I should be able to do. Then that might be a problem for you, because that's not how Pathfinder 2 works. But if you can just hand wave this shit, then this does the most amount of damage. Because at baseline, it goes from 2 to 6 instead of 2 to 4. But you get clumsy, which at low levels is kind of bad, because this is also what lowers your defense. Clumsy 1 gives you a -1 on all dexterity-based things, like AC. So that's rough. So now you're 2 AC down just for a little bit of extra damage. But then once you hit level 7, it goes from 6 to 10. And once you get greater weapon spec, which is like level 13 or 14 or so, you go from 10 to 18 damage. This is plus 18 damage on all your attacks, which is enormous. Like, if you're using a D12 weapon, then that's easily more than 2 extra average damage dice. It's literally equal to 3 extra average D12s. Like, that's equivalent to, a fighter with a deadly weapon critting all the time on every attack they ever make. If any weapon was actually a D12 and had D12 deadly, which nothing is anywhere near those numbers. So barbarians do the most amount of damage, and this is the barbarian that does the absolute most amount of damage. I have played with a giant instinct barbarian, and they crush everything they come up against. It is, as for a GM, it's kind of rough to challenge them without trying to play rocket tag, and also not trying to invalidate the rest of the group. Because if you give the enemies damage reductions, like, well, it's going to hurt everyone else more, because the barbarian easily is doing multiple times more damage than the damage reduction, so it's not very effective for them. And there's not a whole lot of other ways to really work around the barbarian without screwing the rest of the party over. You would have to have enemies that are fast and do trip attacks and stuff, because that's what the barbarian is weak against, low reflex saves. But that's generally not a thing a lot of enemies do. So be prepared if you're a GM and you get a barbarian in your group to be like, oh, well, this guy's gonna just bulldoze through stuff. And if you do put them up against hard challenges, be ready for them to hit real hard and get hit real hard. And that might not be satisfying for anyone. And try to hold back from going, oh, how does that feel? You've been doing this to all my enemies. I put you up against 1 + 3 level above you enemy that is a brute type who hits hard, and oh, it's just like you. And you don't like that, do you? Try not to rub it in your barbarian's face when you put them against, themselves, and they don't like it. But that's almost like the only way to assuredly challenge a barbarian, other than doing lots of, environmental challenges and obstacles and flying enemies and all these things. But those are just still more frustrating than they are, challenging in a lot of ways. So those are definitely concerns I've had while running a game with a barbarian, because they just do so much more damage than all the other classes, and with no effort. Like, you can build a fighter to be stupid good. Crazy damage, crazy chance to hit, good defenses, all that stuff. They still won't touch an out-of-the-box standard build barbarian. Not even like min-maxed. But they'll have a lot more defenses. So it's a thing to think about as a GM. As a player, if you want to just murder stuff, choose this. And then you get to choose a resistance, which every barbarian gets piercing resist. And then you also get an additional resist, which this is choose between cold, electricity, or fire, which is, you know, having a choice is amazing. Most of the others don't really have that much choice. So this is the quintessential glass cannon melee. All damage, less defense. You're still nowhere near as squishy as a caster or even like a combat caster, but you are more squishy than pretty much any other martial build, even though you do have more health than they do. Fury Instinct. Out of the 4 good instincts, this is by far the weakest. Because their damage reduction only works to weapons. So only creatures that are using weapons, which sometimes is a lot of them. If you're in a political campaign or a war campaign or something, then that's going to be pretty much everybody. But if you're doing standard monster hunting, dungeon delving kind of stuff, it's probably going to be less than half. And that's at best. So the resistance doesn't really help you unless it does. It's very iffy. And the rage damage taps out at 12, which is, you know, nowhere near 18, but it's not 8 either. It's on the low side of barbarian damage. They get a free feat, a first level barbarian feat, which is okay, but not fantastic. They don't get a damage boost until level 7. Like, there's not a lot going on here. It's like, hey, if you want a simple one where you don't have much complexity, choose Fury. Like, it's not going to give you a lot, but it's also not going to ask you, hey, build something. You don't have to build. You just go into rage and hit stuff. You won't be fantastic at it, but it won't be complex either. Then we get Dragon, which you choose what kind of dragon you want to be, and that determines what kind of damage resist you get. It also infers there's feats that you can pick up with this that will work off that. Draconic Rage puts you up at the 4 standard damage. And the interesting thing with Dragon Instinct is that this extra damage is elemental damage. Almost all the other ones, except for the really bad ones down here, which is why they're really bad, because their damage doesn't scale up near as high as Dragon, and they also suffer the same negative, is that if you meet a creature that has damage resist all, or just has multiple damage resists, like a physical plus an elemental, you will be hitting both of those resistances, and it will cripple your damage. So that's something to think about. Do not ever play a fire-based Dragon Barbarian, because a lot of things are going to be straight out immune to your bonus rage damage. Just immune to it. Because fire immunity is the most common immunity in the game, and fire resistance is the most common resistance. So choose electricity, because that's the by far least resisted. Or if you need to be thematic, do cold. poison and acid are mixed bags. There's a lot of things that have poison immunity, and there's a decent amount of things that have acid resistance. So electricity and cold are probably your best bets. But whatever you do, do not pick fire. As cool as it would be, don't do it. Unless you're playing a high-level game. Because if you're playing a high-level game and you can get a greater flaming rune, and your GM determines that that effect goes on to all of your damage, because the greater flaming rune makes it so that you can still damage things that are resistant to that damage type. You bypass resistances. So that might be a good option for you. But otherwise, just stay away from it. Then at level 7, it goes from 4 to 8 damage, and when you get weapon spec, it goes up to 16. It's only 2 points behind Giant, but you also don't suffer the additional the -1 AC. You just have to make sure that you keep track of the fact that you're doing elemental damage, and that might not be great in some circumstances. But otherwise, this is probably, like, besides Fury, a very good bread and butter. This is what most barbarians probably should be. As long as you remember to choose electricity damage, then you're probably going to get the most bang for your buck. An Animal Instinct is kind of the most backwards type of barbarian because they're very defensive. They've got, the standard 12 damage, which is decent but not great. But they morph their body into animal parts to do attacks. And sadly, there is not a great amount of balance between the options. You basically have 2 options that give reach, and they're like D10 damage. Natural attacks. All natural attacks in this game are balanced around being one-handed weapons, but the barbarian ones are D10 damage, which are 2-handed weapons, so you're just better than everybody else in that regard. And therefore, those are by far the best options for a barbarian to use. And because these 2 options are antlers and the frog tongue. And so you can easily see both of those being, well, you're not even using your frickin' hands for those things. So you could simultaneously have something in one of your hands, any kind of talisman or consumable or whatever. It's like, hey, keep a freaking the most powerful healing potion you can on hand. So it's just one action to down it instead of trying to pick it off your body somewhere. And your other hand has a shield. There is no reason ever for an animal barbarian not to have a shield. Your third action should always be raise a shield. And then you just have more AC than every other type of barbarian. And there's even a feat somewhere in there that I think gives you even more AC. It undoes the natural penalty you get for raging. So Animal Instinct barbarians are extremely defensive because you get more AC than every other kind of barbarian. They don't hit as hard, but they get easy access to natural reach and can use a shield. Like, that's a lot of great stuff right there. And all the rest, well, let's quickly go through. You get deny advantage, so you can't be flat-footed by things that are, your level or lower. There's 2 instances of this kind of mechanic. One of them is only lower. One of them is equal to or lesser, which I find very weird. Like, It's obviously just the fact that they don't communicate these sort of nuances to all of their independent writers and stuff, but it's still weird. Critical brutality, you get weapon critical specialization while raging. Only while raging. You're generally going to be raging when you're attacking stuff, so that probably doesn't matter most of the time, but almost it's certain classes have restrictions on their crit spec that they get and some don't, which I find very strange. Standard save boost. This level 9 is when you get resistance. You get Mighty Rage at level 11. As a free action, you use the rage act. You can trigger this when you do your rage. Use an action that has the rage trait. Alternatively, you can increase the actions of the triggering rage to 2 to instead use a 2 action activity with the rage trait. Which is kind of nifty because that if you get like a rage ability, pick up a feat that gives you a special attack or ability to do while you're raging, you can instead use that ability while you're not raging, and it will make you rage. It's mechanically the other way around. When you rage, you can automatically use this ability by spending an extra action. But it's still kind of cool. You're stuck with medium armor, which sucks. That's just improving your proficiency in weapons. And I think there's a mistake here on Path Builder. One of the very few mistakes that still hasn't been fixed. I'm almost positive that Weapon Fury also increases your class DC. Which, for Dragon Barbarian, is important. Greater weapon spec. Level 15 is when your damage caps out. Your rage damage. So it's up there a ways, but it's pretty good. And this is also giving you extra damage anyhow. 6 extra damage from this on top of the 18 or 16 you're getting from Giant or Dragon. Like, it's a lot of flat damage. Your minimum damage as a Barbarian is going to be huge. So it's like, even if you roll all ones on all your dice, you're still chunking for giant percentages of monsters' health. Perception increase. Quick Rage. You have to wait till level 17 for this, which sucks. You recover from your rage quickly and are soon ready to begin anew. After you spend a full turn without raging, you can rage again without needing to wait 1 minute. That's like such a small benefit for waiting to level 17. It's just kind of weird. Armor proficiency. Devastating strikes. Your strikes are so devastating that they hardly care about resistance, and your barbarian abilities are unparalleled. Your proficiency rank in your barbarian class DC goes to master. Your melee strikes ignore 10 points of a creature's resistance to their physical damage. This helps giant barbarians, and it helps animal barbarians, but the rest do elemental damage, so is slightly less useful for them. But you're always doing physical damage because you're going to be using a giant D10 or D12 weapon anyway, so it's always helpful. That's it. It's all the innate stuff the class gets. So now I'll try to quickly go over the feats, of which there are a lot. Acute Vision just improves your vision. While you're raging, you gain dark vision, which is far less helpful than it sounds, because you have to be raging, which means you have to be in combat. So you have to already know that you're fighting something to be able to use it. This does not help at all ever while in exploration, which is generally when you need it. Adrenaline Rush. See, this has the rage trait, so you can use it with that level 11 ability. In the heat of battle, you are capable of amazing feats of strength while you are raging. Increase your encumbered and maximum bulk limits by 2. You can also gain a +1 status bonus to athletics checks to lift heavy objects, escape, or force open. This is kind of the thing that you feels like it should just be part of the class automatically, but that's just me. This makes Moment of Clarity makes it so that you can use a concentrate action for 1 turn. But it costs an action, so you better have a good idea of what the hell you want to do with it. Raging Intimidation, a stupidly powerful feat. While you are raging, your demoralized and scared to death actions from those feats gain the rage trait, allowing you to use them while raging, or to immediately start a rage at level 11. As soon as you meet the prerequisites for the skill feats Intimidating Glare and Scare to Death, which are 2 skill feats you are going to take if you are making an intimidation build. You're just going to take those 2 things because they're fantastic. And this makes you automatically gain those feats. So a lot of people might argue that skill feats are less worth it than a class feat, but this is 2 for 1, and it also gives them the rage trait so that at higher levels it opens up more capabilities. So this is a pretty damn good feat, as long as you know how to capitalize on it. Raging Thrower. You apply the additional damage from rage to your thrown weapons. Like, that's sort of a why isn't that way normally, but whatever. Sudden Charge. Stride twice and then attack. You can use this while climbing, swimming, or flying if you have those types, which is cool. Like, this is probably one of the most basic level 1 choices. If you don't specifically have a use for any of this other stuff, you're going to take this. Dragon Instinct specific. The only one that has a level 1 feat. Few can sway you from your goals while the fury of combat fills you. While raging, you gain a +2 status bonus to saving throws against emotion effects. Which is like, that's alright. It means you can't be charmed or dominated or any of that stuff. Well, it makes it harder anyway. So it's alright. It's kind of thematic, but I don't think it's very powerful. But it's alright. Acute Scent. You have to have acute vision or already have dark vision from your ancestry. When you rage, your sense of smell improves. You gain imprecise scent to a range of 30 feet, which, because you have to be raging, it's not anywhere near as good as it could be. All this does is means that while you are in combat and raging, you will automatically know where all enemies are, even if they're invisible, because you will be able to sniff them down. You still won't be able to see them, won't be able to hit them very well because of the automatic miss chance, but you will know where they are. You can pinpoint where they are, roughly. So it's good, but having imprecise scent all the time means you also can't be snuck up on by invisible people, which is, sort of the thing you definitely want. And that can actually be replicated with an item at higher levels, so that makes this feat absolutely obsolete once you get to like level 8 or 10 or something. There's the nose ring. I had that on my druid, and it's pretty amazing. Even if I didn't get much use out of it, just knowing that stuff can't sneak up on you and or turn invisible to get away from you is really good. Bashing charge. 2 actions and you can smash through doors and stuff. You can make an athletics check to break them down. And you get a +1 on it. It's cool. But this is definitely also in that sort of area of this is probably something you would allow somebody to do all the time because it's just cool. Which, again, is sort of another problem Pathfinder has in the... You can't do much of anything unless you have a feat or something saying you can do that. Unless you adjust the way you think... And as a GM, you go, I will allow all my characters to do anything. If they are trying to do something that there is a feat for, then they can do that thing, but they get a penalty. Because this says you can do it, and you get a +1. So maybe you could do this, and instead of getting a +1, you get like a -2. So that, picking up this feat would make it better for you. And maybe, when you do it without this feat, you also take damage from smashing through stuff. There's a lot of ways in this game to either punish your players for not having feats and being really strict. Playing rules as written can feel really terrible in Pathfinder 2. But if you are a very talented GM who knows all the rules offhand and can remember all this stuff, then you can actively be very permissive with your stuff whenever somebody asks you, it's like, oh, well, I want to do this thing. And you're like, well, there's a feat that makes you good at doing that. I will allow you to do this, but I will put a penalty on it. And it would probably be a good piece of advice for all GMs, whenever your character asks to do something that they do not have a feat or a skill or whatever for, allow them to do it with a penalty. Because then, either currently or sometime in the future, there's going to be a feat that allows them to do that with some sort of flourish or some sort of bonus attached to it. And so if you're giving a penalty to all these things, then when they pick up this feat, they're getting rid of that penalty, getting a bonus, and maybe getting some flourishy ribbony stuff on top of it. I think that's a very good way to think about running stuff in Pathfinder 2. And I might try to remember to put that into a suggestion video sometime. But it's here now instead. Furious finish. Desperate to finish the fight, you pour all your rage into a final blow. If it hits, you gain a circumstance bonus to damage equal to the number of rounds remaining in your rage. After the strike, your rage ends, and you are fatigued until you rest for at least 10 minutes. Like, even a +10 to damage on one attack sounds terrible. Like, ending your rage early sounds really, really bad. Because of this right here, fatigued, like, even if you get high levels and you can wait one turn and rage again immediately, you're still going to be fatigued, which is bad for you. Not nearly as bad for you as in, like, 5th edition or anything, but it's still not great for you. And so, this is more of a... I would never use this as a last-ditch trying to win a fight kind of thing, because if it doesn't work, you've just opened yourself up to being far less effective for the rest of combat. And otherwise, if you're fighting weaker stuff and you just want to completely destroy something, then this is a cool overkill, but you don't need it. There's no good use for this. Somebody might be able to make a build that puts this to good use, but I tend to be more of a safe investment kind of person, not a, hey, let's throw caution to the wind, and if this doesn't work, it's gonna kill me kind of player. No escape. A foe within reach attempts to move away from you. There's a couple other classes that have something like this, and I hate them. I hate this ability. Like, when something moves away from you, you just automatically follow it. Like, if you have a big bonus to your move speed, I could see this being alright, because then you can just full 2-3 action attack every turn while chasing something down. But it's also like, how often do you need to chase things down? That really depends on your GM. A lot of GMs run all combats as, fight to the death kind of stuff, which they probably shouldn't do, but whatever. So this is situational depending on your GM kind of feat. It might be good, it might never see use. Second wind, you can enter a second rage, but afterwards you need to catch your breath. You can rage without waiting for 1 minute after the previous rage, or 1 round with quick rage, but when you end this rage, you are fatigued until you rest 10 minutes. You shouldn't ever need this, really. You only have to wait 1 minute between rages, so probably shouldn't need this. If a combat is lasting over 10 rounds, then that's very bizarre. Very rare. Shake it off. This is pretty good. Reduce your frightened condition by 1 and attempt a fortitude save to recover from the sickened condition as if you had spent an action retching. You reduce your sickened condition value by 1 on a failure, 2 on a success, and 3 on a critical success. This is just fucking amazing. Like, you can reduce your frightened value by 1 by spending an action. Which means if you're like frightened 3 or frightened 2, then your turn starts, it goes down by 1. You spend an action, it goes down again. And then, hey, if you want to get rid of some more, this doesn't have flourish on it, so you can just spend actions to get rid of any stacks of frightened you want to. And it also gives you a stupidly good bonus on trying to recover from sickened, because you're going to have to spend an action anyway. But this makes it so that you succeed on a failure, you critically succeed on a success, and if you get a crit success, you're better than anybody else could ever be. That is just fantastic. 4th level, Barreling Charge. Somebody thought we needed a whole bunch of charging attacks, so we have them now. You stride, attempting to move through your enemy's spaces and make a melee strike. Roll an athletics checks and compare it to the result of the fortitude DC of each creature you choose to attempt to move through during your stride, moving through its space on a success but ending your movement before entering its space on a failure. You can use Barreling Charge to all the special movements. This is basically just tumbling through, only you're using athletics instead of acrobatics. And you get to attack. Or no, you don't even get to attack. No, you don't. You're spending 2 actions to do a 1-action thing, but with a different skill. I mean, that's alright. It's got Flourish, which kind of sucks. But I mean, if you're finding yourself in tight corridors and you need to go through enemies, this is useful. Fast movement. Plus 10 status bonus to speed. If you can't find any other way ever to get a status bonus to speed, then this is alright. But there's kind of a lot of ways to do that. So, maybe not the most useful thing. Like, even wasting 1 feat to pick up a spellcasting multi-class, allows you to use wands, and then just pick up a wand of level 2 Longstrider, and that does the same thing. And picking up those wands picking up that feat would not only allow you to spend money to do this feat, but also open up so you can use tons of other wands. You can't use them in combat or anything because of concentrate, but like you could find ways to buff yourself if you absolutely need to. I'm sure there's some way you could find to maximize that instead of just using a single level 4 feat. In fact, instead of taking this feat, if you want this effect, take the multi-class at this level. Flip, trained in acrobatics and medium armor. Enemy targets you with a melee strike, flinging your body and twisting somersault. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to AC against the triggering attack. If the attack still hits you, you can step to an open space that's still within the triggering enemy's reach. This is pretty terrible. Like, this is the same thing as reactive shield, +2 circumstance bonus to AC. Except for if you still get hit, you can circle around the enemy with one step. You can't get away from them. You still have to stay within their reach. And it's only for that one attack, whereas reactive shield would then give you that bonus until the start of your turn. So, I think this is pretty terrible. It's just so weird. Like, I can't imagine a scene where that extra step is worth... I mean, most barbarians aren't going to have a shield, so sure. Being able to even do this, if you have no other reaction and you need some defense, fine, take this, I guess. But compared to other options, especially for these other two classes, like... it's so very niche, and there's this class. All three of these classes get a much better reaction, so I would not ever want to use this reaction for this. For a Spirit Instinct, Ghost Wrangler, spirits around you coalesce upon your fists, enabling you to harm ghosts. You get Ghost Touch. Which, you know, if that's what you're doing, then that's good. I don't think you can get... Well... This is probably about the level you might be able to get Ghost Touch on your weapon. But now you can get something else, and always have Ghost Touch on your stuff. So, pick up some damage. And then you'll be better than everybody else. That's kind of cool. A nerd to alchemy. Expert in fortitude saves. Regional requirements. So you will not use this. It's uncommon because it comes from an AP. Number 178. So, yeah. You can't get it, so you can't use it. Oversized throw. You have one or more hands free. With a great heave, you seize a piece of your surroundings, such as a boulder, log, table, wagon, or chunk of earth, Hulk smash, and hurl it at your foes. The object must be your size or one size smaller than you, and it must not have too much bulk for you to lift in the first place. Sort of limiting. Make a ranged strike with the object regardless of the result. The object takes the same amount of damage it would deal on a success. The object is a simple ranged weapon that deals 1d10 bludgeoning damage, has a range increment of 20 feet, and has the thrown weapon trait. The damage increases to 2d10 if you have weapon spec, and 3d10 if you have greater weapon spec. So slightly worse than weapon progression. And takes 2 actions for a single attack. And is only 20 feet. But, you know, if you don't want a ranged weapon, this is gives you a ranged weapon. Kind of. But this is pretty much trash. Like, having said all that, like, if you are a animal instinct barbarian, you're gonna have a hand freeze, so then you could use this. But everyone else is gonna be using two-handed weapons because you want more damage, because that's literally what your class does. So you're not gonna ever have the hands free to do these sort of things. So yeah. If you could make a cool build for it, then you could do a cool thing with it. But for most people, especially with that terrible range, it's not even a real ranged attack. Raging Athlete. Physical obstacles can't hold back your fury. When you are raging, you gain a climb speed and swim speed equal to your land speed, and a DC of high jumps and long jumps decreases by 10. Your distance for all vertical leaps increases by 5 feet vertically, and your distance for horizontal leaps increases by 15 feet if your speed is at least 15, and 20 if your speed is at least 30. So this does exactly what it says. You become a better athlete while raging. You can do cool stuff and everything is easier. Like, climb speed and swim speed sucks that you can only get it while raging, but, you know, when you need those, they are ridiculously handy. Because you got to think, your normal max speed when you do not have a swim speed or a climb speed is 5 or 10. You have to critically succeed on the check to go 10 feet. Base move speed for almost everyone is 25. So just having the slowest available swim speed is better than having to make checks to move. Like, at least 2 to 1. Often 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. So if you think you're going to need these things, they're really good. But the fact that it only happens while raging sucks. Like, that would be the reason why I wouldn't choose this. Not because the benefits are fantastic, but the trigger for it sucks. I get that that's the whole thing of the class, but most of the time you're going to be swimming and climbing outside of combat. You don't want to be doing that shit inside of combat unless, you know, it's to get to an enemy that's outside your reach. In those instances, it's perfect. But most of the time, this doesn't help you get over obstacles. And that can often be a big part of the game. So, great, but could be fantastic. Spiritual guides for Spirit Instinct Barbarians. Once a day, you fail but don't critically fail a perception check or a skill check. Though no one sees them, and you can only hear them, the spirits around you constantly chatter, save when you are raging. Sometimes they are even helpful. You can heed the spirit's guidance to reroll a triggering check. Use the second result, even if it's worse. Fuck you. Seriously. Whenever it comes up about hero points and fortune effects, I've convinced my group, because I brought it up to them once, that all fortune effects, including hero points, should automatically just work. They should just make things better. Because it feels like fucking shit to roll like a 5 and fail something, and then re-roll it and roll a fucking 1 or a 2 and get a critical fail. When you go from bad to fucking worse, that's just like, oh, hey, I took a chance and I dicked myself. Like, that just feels like shit. Hero points and fortune effects shouldn't be gambling. Like, in the grand scheme of, oh, you're rolling dice, everything's a gamble. The entire D20 Dungeons & Dragons systems is just about gambling shit. Sure, if that's what gets you off for playing these kind of games, is just the randomness of the dice, then sure, play that way. But for me and the people I play with, it's like, we want to have some agency over our characters. And hero points are supposed to be that. Fortune effects are supposed to be that. They're supposed to be good luck. So I I brought up and I instigated it in all of my games, and the GM for the game that I'm in agreed with my take on it. It's like whenever you use a fortune effect, you can either choose to re-roll in case you roll a 1, or roll low enough to get a crit failure, or bump yourself up an automatic tier of success. It's like, does this make it easier for characters to get stuff done? Do crazy amounts of reliable damage with stuff? It's like, yeah, it makes characters stronger, sometimes significantly stronger. But I think the downside to the GM of having your characters be able to choose when they can be awesome doesn't outweigh the fact that fucking the opposite just ruins the game for everybody. Like rolling worse on a fortune effect feels like absolute shit. It's just like the worst feeling in the game. Whereas being able to reliably choose to be awesome, that's just makes your characters feel good. Just makes your players happy that, yeah, I just chose to do this awesome thing. I twisted the die roll into my favor. Like, that's just a great thing. You can always choose how fast you want to give hero points to characters, so you're the one, saying how fast they can do those things. So anytime there's a fortune effect and it has this bullshit on it, garbage. Absolute fucking trash. I hate all things like that. Once a day, it should automatically make you crit succeed. If it's a once a fucking day ability, everything about this is hot dog shit. Like, I cannot state how much I hate this. Once per day, and it can make your shit worse. Why would you ever make something like that? Whoever wrote this hates players. Like, I don't mean that as an attack or whatever, but, they probably weren't even thinking about it like that. But that's what this comes off as, is there's a lot of times where this could just be an absolute shit ability that fucks your character over. And that should never be what any of your things do. They should always improve your character or give you alternate options. It should never be a risk thing that fucks you. Sorry. I like having strong players in my game. I like having players that can make their characters choose to do awesome things and make them feel good. Like, my group is playing through with guns right now, and being able to use a hero point and turn any hit into a crit with a gun is stupid friggin' powerful, but it feels amazing. So, yeah. I would say, as a GM, always try to make your characters more powerful, because you can just throw harder stuff at them if you need to. Like, there's so many easy ways to tweak monsters to make them harder, that just giving this concession of, hey, characters can choose when they want to be awesome, it should be no contest that people like this idea. Like, there should not be much pushback against it. And there has been. I have had conversations with people who are like, oh, everybody can just save up their hero points and burst down a boss. It's like, cool. Make your boss fucking crazy hard. Give them, like, your heroes can do that. Make it so that your bosses can do it too. Have you ever watched Jason Bowman play this game? One of the creators of the game? All his streams, he allows players to only get hero points when people donate to the stream to buy hero points for players. But he also allows people to donate to streams to buy villain points so that he can do that with any of his roles. So just institute that. Just say that, just like friggin' D&D 5e has legendary actions, which are absolute bullshit. Legendary actions in 5e are bullshit. It's literally a mechanic allowing your boss monsters to cheat the system, because the system is not balanced to have one boss monster versus 4 characters. It's literally not built to ever be balanced in that way. So they just created this fucking cheat system for bosses. And it's bullshit. So just hey, players have this cheat system of hero points. Give it to your bosses. Make it so that your bosses can get 2 or 3, villain points, and then suddenly, bam. Your heroes better be fucking ready for these bosses because they're going to pull some shit out. And that just makes everything more interesting. And you can tailor how many roles a villain has based on how your heroes are saving up points. And then once your players catch on to that's what you're doing, they could easily just decide, hey, let's not save up all our points. And then they get into a boss battle, and the boss never uses a villain point because they didn't have any, because none of the players had them. Bam. It's called being good at GMing. You change stuff to make the play better. Make your players happy. Supernatural senses. Sorry for the rant. It's just something I feel very strongly about. Acute scent or precise or imprecise scent. Your scent is preternaturally sharp, and you can always rely on your sense of smell to help guide you when your vision is compromised. When you target a concealed or hidden opponent while you are raging, you reduce the DC flat check to 3 for concealed and 9 for hidden. This is pretty weak. Only when raging, and all it does is make it easier to hit things. The 5 goes to a 3, and the, 10 goes to a 9? That's not fantastic. Swipe. 2 action flourish, and you can strike 2 adjacent enemies for 1 attack. You roll damage once and apply it to both. You have to roll and strike both of them, and it counts as 2 attacks, which you apply afterwards. And if you're using a weapon with the sweep trait, which don't ever swipe without that because they go together beautifully, this modifier applies to all your sweep attacks. Because sweep normally makes it so that you get a bonus on a second creature attacking one creature, and then your next attack, you attack something next to it, you get a bonus. Which is stupid, because don't ever do that. Don't ever swap targets. Your party should be good at singling down one enemy at a time to reduce threats. So, sweep with swipe means you get that bonus on both things you're hitting, which is great. You want that. Wounded Rage. This is a pretty decent reaction, whereas the other ones have not been fantastic. You take damage and are capable of entering Rage, so you do so. Rage on getting hit. This could easily save you actions. Don't start combat and rage. Try to get hit first. You won't get, at higher levels, past level 9, you won't get your damage resistance to that first hit, but you can, until then, from level 4 through 8 for 4 levels, you can easily go through and do this and save yourself an action. Which might be the difference between being able to beat the bejesus out of something and have a great routine and not. Whereas if you're not finding a way to make any use of this, it won't be any good for you. Which I love abilities that are like that. Abilities that allow certain play styles to function better are great. And here it is. Animal Skin. For Animal Instinct, your proficiency in unarmored defense increases to Expert. I'm trying to think. When do you normally get Expert for medium armor? I think it's at like level 13, isn't it? No. I don't remember now. I think this gives you faster armor scaling, but only for unarmored. When you are raging and unarmored, your skin transforms into thick hide. You gain a +2 item bonus to AC, +3 if you have greater Juggernaut class feature. The thickness of your hide gives you a dexterity modifier cap to your AC of +3. This item bonus to AC is cumulative with armor potency runes. So, what does that all mean? That means at level 6 when you pick this up, you'll have the equivalent of standard armor. So long as you have 16 dexterity. Because that'll be 3 plus 2 is 5, which is standard armor. But once you get greater juggernaut, it turns into heavy armor. And since this gets your potency runes, you don't have to worry about those. You'll always be on par. Which means you take this feat, and you can be just as defensive as a fighter because you will be wearing heavy armor. You'll still get the -1 for raging, so you'll be less than fighter, but be a hell of a lot better than other barbarians. But it does require a fairly high dexterity. But honestly, unless you don't mind being pounded in the face with spell damage, you want to get 18 AC by the time you hit like level 15 or 20. You want to max out your saves. So a 16 dexterity is not a difficult call for this. You probably won't get there until like level 15 at the earliest. So unless you want to sacrifice something else to progress this faster, like will saves or something, make strength and dexterity your 2 highest stats, it is definitely viable for an animal's instinct barbarian to be very, very defensive. Shield plus animal skin is crazy, crazy good. And then if you want to spend like a couple feats getting the archetype for what is it, Bastion? Whatever one gives you the shield block feats, like you could be amazing. Get some of the highest health in the game, have great offense and damage, and have pretty damn good defense. Like, Animal Instinct has a lot going for it that might not seem apparent at first glance. Then here's the quintessential reaction for barbarians. All barbarians should have this. Because they are the highest single strike damage class in the game, there's never a reason for a barbarian not to have this. Because that's what you do. You get 1 extra strike when somebody triggers it. And since you are the single strike damage king, you are the best at attack of opportunity. Fighters might get it naturally, but you are better than them at it. So pick this up. If you want to go down this list, barbarians are best at it. Champions are pretty terrible at it. Magus is almost as well. Actually, if the champion has like Blade Ally and all that stuff, they can be bad at it, but not terrible. Magus is pretty terrible because they don't have a lot of ways to boost their normal strike damage. Same with Swashbuckler. Absolute garbage attack of opportunity. These two classes suck at attack of opportunity because they are not engaging their class damage mechanic while doing so. So they're just doing close to base levels of fucking damage, which is... This guy has plus 12 to plus 18. This has plus 1 to plus 4. This has plus 2 if you're an plus 1 damage if you're an arcane cascade, maybe. And it scales to maybe 2 or 3. And champions depends on what you choose for feats. So, like, these classes are not good at attack of opportunity. They're just real bad at it. Or barbarian is ridiculous at it. So all barbarians should have attack of opportunity, period. Brutal bully. He pushed foes around. Excuse me. While raging, when you successfully disarm, grapple, shove, or trip a foe, you deal that foe bludgeoning damage equal to your strength. This is... Like, Monk has this, too. Just for grabs, though. Like, adding 4 to 7 extra damage to a maneuver is alright. But it's not huge. Like, if choosing between this and attack of opportunity, this is useless. Like, literally useless. You are going to get more damage out of attack of opportunity, even if you don't even trigger it once per combat. Like, once every other combat, you will do more damage with this, because you're going to do all your dice worth of damage plus your rage damage versus your strength damage every time you successfully do a maneuver. Like, barbarians aren't great at maneuvers, first and foremost. So, I mean, if there's something that allows you to automatically grapple, if your GM determines that triggers Brutal Bully, then sure, maybe. That's practically free damage almost. So in that sense, this could be semi-decent, but definitely take that first. Cleave. Another reaction that's competing with attack of opportunity. Your melee strike kills a creature or knocks it unconscious, and another foe is adjacent to that creature, and you get another attack. So, this is iffy. Like, there's a lot more ways to force attacks of opportunity in a good group versus Cleave. You have to have enemies that are next to each other, which maybe not all that uncommon. And you have to be the one that downs them. Which, if you are the damage dealer in your group, which you're a barbarian, so you probably are, then you could get some good use out of this. I would say Cleave is probably more useful if you're in a bad group that's not synergizing very well, whereas if you're in a group that uses lots of forced movement and fear and all that kind of stuff, attack of opportunity is going to be way better. Because if you trip somebody and then frighten them with the feat that makes them run away when frightened, that means they're going to stand up and you got an attack of opportunity. And then when they try to run away, like the next, if it's on a different turn or whatever, or maybe a different enemy gets frightened and runs away, you're going to get a strike on them too. So you could trigger attack of opportunity every single round reliably with a good group. Whereas this is only when you specifically kill something. So that would depend on your party build. Dragon's Rage Breath. Dragon Instinct, you can breathe fire. Its damage is mediocre, which it's not good damage, but when you compare 1d6 every 2 levels to pretty much every other option in the entire game scales off from 1d4 every 2 levels, this is better than everybody else's cone damage. But it's still not great. A d6 every 2 levels averages 3 damage. Enemies are getting 10 health a level, and you're doing 3 every 2 levels. So you're averaging 1.5 to their 10. So you're basically scaling at 15% of their health for damage. Except for they'll also start getting, constitution buffs to their health as they level up. So all AoE type abilities like Dragon's Breath, Kobold Breath, all of those things, and a lot of spells that scale in that same way too, especially lower level spells, scale really, 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 really badly. I'm pretty sure next week I'm going to be putting out a video all about spell casting and how it's terrible in Pathfinder 2, but this will be one of the big reasons. It's because the scaling on it is really bad. Giant stature. Whoop. Let's get that back in the screen. Giant instinct. You are medium or smaller. You grow to incredible size. You become large, increasing your reach by 5 feet and gaining the clumsy 1 condition until you stop raging. Which, you know, if you are a giant barbarian, you're already clumsy 1 because of your weapon. So, yeah. You get reach. There's almost no reason not to take this because you're already clumsy 1. So, this just gives you reach. Inner strength. Concentrate rage. So, you need to take the thing that allows you to even do this, because you can't concentrate while raging. Your strength is part of your rage, so as long as your anger remains, you can gather your strength and rage to overcome any sort of enfeeblement. You reduce your enfeebled condition's value by 1. So you have to take another feat and spend an action to be able to concentrate during your rage to use this. Yeah. Don't think I need to explain why that's pretty fucking terrible. Mage Hunter for superstition. Creature within reach casts a spell. You use your hatred of magic to lash out at the sight of spellcasting, allow you to interrupt an enemy's spell. Make a melee strike against it. If the attack is a critical hit, you disrupt the spell. This is attack of opportunity, except for its only trigger is on spellcast. But it has the additional rider of if you crit, you disrupt the spell. This is pretty garbage. Like, it sucks that attack of opportunity doesn't do this automatically on the crit function, but this is rarely, if ever, going to trigger, so it's just bad. If it had, like, a +2 to hit or something, like a +2 circumstance bonus to hit, this might not be terrible, but ugh. Nocturnal sense. Prerequisites: acute scent, precise sense, or imprecise sense, and low light vision. Which, if you have dark vision, I think you also qualify as having low light vision. I'm not quite sure on that though. But this is for when you don't. Your senses gain even greater clarity while raging. You gain dark vision if you don't already have it, and the range of your imprecise sense increases to 60 feet. So that's pretty good. More range. You have to be raging, so it's probably useless. Like, to know an invisible creature is greater than 30 feet away from you and less than 60 probably doesn't ever happen in APs. It might happen in your home games and stuff, so this is maybe vaguely useful, but it's awful high level for what little it does. Pain tolerance. Uncommon, so regional requirement, so you will not get it. So, yeah. You gain resistance to mental damage equal to half your level and a circumstance bonus to saving throws against effects that would make you clumsy, drained, or enfeebled. It's pretty good. If your GM allows you to have this, I would say it's pretty good. Because you don't want these things. These things are real bad for you. Like, all 3 of these things are just really, really bad for you. Scouring Rage. An instinct that allows you to change your additional damage from rage to a different damage type. You emit a powerful surge of instinctual energy when you unleash your potential. Each adjacent creature takes damage equal to your level. with a saving throw of the same type as the additional damage during that rage. Now, if you could somehow twist this last line to mean that you do this every round, then this is a decent feat. It pretty much explicitly doesn't mean that, though. You just get a free action when you rage to do 1 tick of damage of your level on a fortitude save, which the vast majority of creatures are going to save. So you're going to be doing half your level in damage. At this level, that would be 3 damage. Do you want to spend a feat to do 3 damage once per combat? And you have to make sure to run up to enemies before you rage to trigger this. So the answer to that is no. This is garbage. Absolute garbage. Like, somebody tried to find a way to be able to, do the finish one to end your rage and then start a new rage to be able to use this multiple times in a combat. But it doesn't work because of the way different things interact. And even if it did, it's still, the damage is so freaking low, it's a joke. So, yeah. It's bad. It's cool as fuck. That's the problem. Like, so many, like, very thematic, very cool feats and abilities in Pathfinder 2 mechanically are terrible. And it's, I think, like, the number one thing that hurts this system so much is that for so many abilities, they are so conservative on how strong they want these powers to be. Because this thing could easily be a damage aura. Or, do, I don't know, twice your level or whatever, and it still wouldn't be fantastic because it's only once per combat. Spirit's Interference. For Spirit Instinct Barbarians, you call forth protective spirits to ward off ranged attacks. Until your rage ends, anyone making a rage against you must succeed at a DC 5 flat check, or the attack misses with no effect. That's like minor concealment for the whole time you're raging. I mean, that's not bad for one action. Oops, sorry. That's not bad. It's weird, but it's not bad. Animal Rage. You transform into your animal. You gain the effects of a 3rd level animal form spell, except you use your own statistics, temporary hit points, and unarmed attacks instead of those granted by animal form. You also retain the constant abilities of your gear. If your animal is a frog, your tongue's reach increases to 15 feet. Dismissing the transformation gains the rage trait. So let's get concentrate on it. So you're going to have to use the ability that allows you to concentrate at all. Just kind of stupid. But a 3rd level animal form spell sucks. Especially by 8th level. It will already be slightly behind. And as you gain levels, it'll get worse and worse and worse. Except for the fact that you use your own statistics. So then what are you getting from animal form? Like, you're literally replacing everything that animal form replaces with your own stuff. Like, is this supposed to just be, hey, you look like an animal now? You turn, while you rage, you turn into this animal. This could easily just say that it's an illusion effect or something. I don't know. You also get all your gear stuff. So I don't know, like, what this is supposed to accomplish. There's, like, a few... Like, you can get the animal-specific bonuses, I guess? I don't recall what those are, but every animal does have its own like one unique special statistic. So that would be like the only thing you're picking up. Like most of the time you would probably be elk because they have 50-foot move speed. So using this, you could just give yourself, or maybe it's 40, but you could just give yourself move speed. Why would you not want to do that? So yeah, I mean, if that's what you're doing it for, just to get that move speed, then that's pretty amazing. Starting with a 50 move speed plus the 10 you can get for the status bonus, 60 move speed, you're almost as fast as a high level friggin' monk at that point. So, yeah, it can be pretty good, but there's bound to be a bunch of options which just are trash. But, whatever. You can make it do cool things, and it makes you look cool, so sort of a win-win. Even if there's a lot of trap optionage available in it, it's still a pretty win-win for both min-maxers and just thematic players. Disarming Assault. You're trained in athletics. You attack with enough force to knock the weapon out of a foe's hands. Well, you shouldn't put that there because that's not what disarm does. Make a melee strike. If you hit, you can attempt an athletics check to disarm that foe. Yeah. Disarm does not knock a weapon out of the foe's hands unless you get a critical success, which is pretty freaking difficult. I mean, getting it for free when you're doing a strike? If you are a Fury Barbarian and you're specifically in a campaign where all you're fighting against is humanoids, this is probably not a bad idea. Probably not a bad idea. You know, you go up to the boss, you disarming assault them, that loosens their grip on their weapon some, and then you just stack that bonus with doing it again, and you have a small chance of actually, disarming them. Or if you're using my idea for hero points, you can actually disarm fairly easily. So that could be really good. But then there's tons of enemies where this would be absolutely useless against. So mileage may vary, but it's pretty cool. Follow-up assault. You used your previous action to make a melee strike that missed. Even in the face of failure, you press the attack determined to succeed. Make a strike with the same weapon, adding the effects of the backswing and forceful traits. Both of those traits are pretty fucking terrible because neither of them scale, which a lot of the damaging and effect traits have this problem, which sucks bad. Like, forceful isn't as bad because it scales a tiny bit. It goes from 1 extra damage to 2 extra damage to, I think, 3 extra damage maximum. So it's not great. At higher levels, not even really useful. And backswing gives you a +1 to hit, I think. So, not terrible, but not great either. Especially if you somehow manage to pick up some attacks somewhere. Friendly Toss. You're adjacent to an ally and have one or more hands free. You throw an ally because that's cool and interesting. You can throw them 30 feet, basically one move action, and doesn't trigger reactions. They don't take any damage. And if they are within reach of an enemy, they can spend a reaction to attack that enemy. That's decent. Like, everything about this is cool. I just don't see a lot of situations where, what kind of a party compilation are you building where your barbarian, your run up to the enemy and smack the shit out of them character, needs to readjust somebody else's position? Like, if you're throwing a squishy out of combat, since it doesn't trigger reactions, that's pretty fucking cool. You pick up your spellcaster and wing them a little bit out of combat. That's kind of cool. It's 2 fucking actions, though. Like, probably going to be better off just hitting that foe twice and downing them with your massive damage. But it's still cool, especially if you can convince your GM that you can throw people upwards. Because almost everything in this entire game is 2-dimensional. Sadly, for whatever friggin' reason, they did not design Pathfinder 2 to be 3-dimensional. You only have X and Y axes. So you can either move forward and backwards on the plane, or you can go up and down. That's it. There's no diagonal. No abilities ever say that you are allowed to move diagonally when it comes to special abilities other than just move speed, which infuriates me because all of the jump rules are like that. I was playing in a game where one of the characters had cloud jump, and they're like, oh, I'm going to jump like the Hulk and just jump over this wall. And it's like, well, you can't do that. And like, well, why not? Because first, you can either jump forward into the wall, or you can jump up and then fall back down. And hopefully arrest a fall as you're going down, grab a ledge to then pull yourself up onto the wall. And once we got through all that, we were kind of like, oh, that sucks. That's really stupid. Everything you would want the jumping mechanics and cloud jump to do, it doesn't actually do. And then when you really think about that stuff, it's like, okay, that means you can't jump over anyone's head because you don't jump up and forward. The rules state the most amount of jumping forward you can do is like 5 feet. When you jump up, you can go 5 feet to get over a ledge, which is like, they should have just put in a mathematical calculation for trajectory jumping, because not being able to trajectory jump is so immersion breaking and just destroys the fantasy of the Hulk kind of character where you can just jump over everything. So yeah, you might want to think about that sort of thing when you start playing. Talk with your GM, and hopefully they think that's stupid too. So if you can do a trajectory throw with this, then you could maybe throw your friendly spellcaster up onto a shelf or something. Put them away for safekeeping so that enemies can't get to them. That would be awesome. I think that would be an amazing use of 2 actions. Furious Bully. Master in Athletics. You bully foes across the battlefield while raging. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to athletics checks for attack actions. Not attacks, because those aren't athletics checks. This is only to do what? What are athletic checks for attack actions? Push and trip. That's it, right? So, pro tip, don't ever push. It's fucking stupid unless you can get it for free. It's very often bad. Or at least don't specialize in it. Don't take things that buff just pushing, because it's frickin' terrible. But get some tripping. Tripping is ace. Because if you trip somebody, that gives you a free attack with attack of opportunity, because they're going to stand themselves up, and then you'll hit them. So do trip. Like, trip all the time. Push only when you absolutely need to. Trip all the damn time. Unless it stops working because they're a dex-based enemy. Instinctive strike. Acute sense or precise or imprecise scent as requirements. You trust your instincts and make your sense of smell using all your senses to pinpoint your opponent's location. Make a melee strike against an opponent that isn't hiding its scent with an effect like negate aroma, aka everything that's in the game. So far, unless you're making your own enemy, no enemy can have negate aroma. They don't have it, as far as I know. If you're making your own own enemies from scratch, you can give this ability, but none of the printed enemies have this. So this will always work. This attack ignores any flat check required due to the target being concealed or hidden. 2 actions to make a hit, a single attack that ignores mischance. That's pretty decent. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but after seeing how many attacks can get foiled by frickin' will-o-wisps being damn invisible, yeah, this is pretty good. Another choice is to just get rid of their invisibility with Dust of Appearance and stuff. And then you won't ever need this. And it's a fairly cheap item, so, you know. Renewed Vigor. You pause to recover your Raging Vigor. You gain temporary HP equal to half your level plus your Constitution modifier. This is bad for animal barbarians because they're already using their 3rd action to shield block. This is fantastic for every other barbarian because you can strike twice and then get some temp HP. And that's your defense. So you're constantly putting up a defensive barrier every round. That is awesome. Fantastic feat. Share Rage. You haven't used this ability since you last raged. You stoke an ally's fury while you are raging. One willing creature within 30 feet gains the effect of the rage action, except it can't. It can still use concentrate actions. It's good that you don't fuck your allies over by preventing them from concentrating. But the base rage action kind of sucks. Because all base rage gives you is +2 damage, -1 AC. That's not a good trade. An 8th level fucking feat to inflict that on your allies? That's bad. That's real bad. Like, casting Enlarge on somebody does the same thing, only gives them reach as well. So, yeah. You have other options that do better than that. If you need to do that sort of thing. I don't know. Sudden Leap. You make an impressive leap and swing while you soar. Make a leap, high jump, or long jump, and attempt 1 melee strike at any point during your jump. Immediately after the strike, you fall to the ground if you're in the air, even if you haven't reached the maximum distance of your jump. If the distance you fall is no more than the height of your jump, you take no damage and land upright. When attempting a high jump or long jump during a sudden leap, determine the DC using the long jump's DC and increase your maximum distance to double your speed. Special. If you have Felling Strike, you can spend 3 actions to make a sudden leap and use Felling Strike instead of a normal strike. So, Sudden Leap is pretty damn good. Because it gives you a small chance of being able to hit flying stuff. You still probably can't jump high enough a lot of the time unless you're indoors or whatever, but it's a chance. And pro tip, or, look into the future, Felling Strike makes it so when you hit a flying enemy, it falls to the ground. So when you do a 3-action sudden leap Felling Strike, you are literally jumping up into the air to Dragon Ball Z punch somebody into the ground. So that's awesome as fuck. Thrash! One action, you have a foe grabbed. You thrash the grabbed foe around. It takes bludgeoning damage equal to your strength modifier plus your weapon specialization damage plus your rage damage. The foe must attempt a basic fortitude save against your class DC. So, this is super cool. You grab somebody and then you just bash their head into the ground. The problem is, A, basic fortitude save against your class DC. Your class DC is really low. I will have to remember to touch on this when I do part of my why spellcasting is bad. But it's like spellcasters often get resisted. And they have much better DCs than you do. So your DC is probably, like ballpark guess, going to be resisted for half damage about 75% of the time. And enemies are going to outright ignore the damage like 35% of the time. That's, not a great feeling. And so with that in mind, you must think, oh, well, it has to do a lot of damage, right? It's like, no, it does a lot less damage than your regular attacks. Because it does the exact same damage as your regular strike, just without any of your weapon damage. Or your weapon rune damage. Which is, by level 8, that's going to be at least an extra D10 or D12. And at least 1d6 worth of elemental damage. Close to 2 at that level for weapon damage. And at high levels, that means you're missing out on 4 ticks of weapon damage, so 4d12, plus 3 ticks of elemental damage, 3d6, for the same action cost. And it can be resisted. Now, it's automatic damage, so there's no chance of missing. So, depending on just how high the enemy's fortitude save is, it might be better to thrash for damage instead of trying to hit something that has really heavy armor. That's super cool and super thematic, but it's also kind of weak. If you're in a party that has a good way to reduce the enemy's fortitude save, like enfeeble does strength. I don't think there is a con negative now, so you can't even do that without lowering AC as well. So, I don't know, this ability is cool, but it's probably not worth your time. If you make a very, very specific grappling barbarian build, then it can be interesting and effective because you're trading damage for CC at that point, because you're grabbing an enemy and smash them into the ground. So if you want to make a barbarian that's more focused on CC and doing decent levels of damage instead of disgusting levels of damage, that's a possibility. And you might need it in your group. Who knows? Especially good for like an animal barbarian where you have high defense. Come and get me! You open yourself to attacks so you can respond to them. Until your rage ends, you are flat-footed, and damage rolls against you gain a +2 circumstance bonus. If a creature hits you, that creature is flat-footed to you until the end of your next turn. If you hit it before the end of your next turn, you gain temporary hit points equal to your Constitution modifier, or double that on a critical hit. I don't understand this. Like, what is this trying to do? Like, conceptually, the same ability exists in 5th edition where you give enemies advantage on you to get advantage on all your attacks. Except this is just so much worse. You get flat-footed permanently. And enemies only get flat-footed to you after they hit you. And only until your next turn. So on their most important attack, they aren't flat-footed against you. Or if you have some sort of retaliation ability or whatever. And you're also giving them a +2 circumstance bonus to damage against you. And you're getting no bonus damage. But you get temporary hit points when you hit, which don't stack. So if you hit somebody twice because they're flat-footed to you now, you only get one instance of Constitution modifier for health. This is garbage. This is so friggin' bad. It's almost too bad to be true. Like, the temp HP needs to be a lot higher than that. Like, at least twice your modifier, and then scale up to 3 times your modifier at like level 18 or some shit. I don't know. Like, enemies are going to be hitting you for like 50 to 80 damage at higher levels. Getting a +7 hit points when you hit them after they hit you is just so bad. On a one-on-one fight, and you're also giving them +2 to damage. So that's literally lowering the amount of temporary HP you get, it's worth anyway, by 2. So it's only a 5 at a 2 or a 3 at max level. Like, if you use this is you trying to die. You're making it easier for enemies to kill you to give yourself almost nothing in return. Because the temporary HP will be negated by the fact that you're giving them a bonus damage to you. And enemies are going to hit you more than once in a goddamn turn. They're going to be getting 2, 4, maybe even +6 to damage because you did this stupid ability, and it's only going to give you 4 or 5 temporary HP. That is so dumb. It is unbelievably stupid. Don't ever take this ability. Like, ever. Holy shit, it is so fucking bad. Like, it is upsetting me how bad this is. Uncommon, so you're probably not ever going to get this. Corpse Killer's Defiance. You destroy an undead foe. Allies that can see you gain a +1 status bonus to attack and damage rolls against undead for 1 round, or +2 status bonus for 2 rounds if the undead foe destroyed was a creature of your level or higher. Alright. I mean, if you're in an undead killing campaign like Abomination Vaults, this is pretty good. Determined Dash. Nothing can keep you away from the enemy. Stride twice. During this movement, you ignore difficult terrain, greater difficult terrain, and any effects that would impose a penalty to speed. That alone is pretty friggin' good right there. You can attempt an athletics check instead of an acrobatics check to balance when moving across narrow surfaces or uneven ground using the same DC. This doesn't prevent you from being harmed by hazardous terrain. You can increase the number of actions activity takes up to 3 to stride 3 times instead. Yeah, this is just pretty good. If you're get into a lot of situations where the terrain is a pain in your ass, or you're running across rooftops or ice or anything, this is a fantastic ability to have. It's just good. It's not mind-blowing or anything. It's not always useful, but in the situations that is useful, the effect is great. And that's the kind of thing you want to see. It's like, hey, I could go, and an entire level or two without using this feat. But then when I get to an area where it's like, hey, I got a lot of difficult terrain, or an enemy, the big bad is escaping over ice, or a tightrope or whatever, then this is going to do exactly what you want it to do. It's just going to make you effective in that situation. And that's exactly what you want. Furious Sprint. You rush forward, stride up to 5 times your speed in a straight line. You can increase the number of actions this activity takes to 3 to stride 8 times your speed in a straight line instead. This allows you to run, and you have to run, because this does not say you can use any other type of movement, which sucks. If this allowed you to fly and stuff, I would say this combined with the Dragon Barbarian's wings that it can get, which are coming up soon here, would be amazeballs. Just find a way to jump off a building or whatever and just fly straight for 8 times your friggin' move speed. Like, this is a super cool ability, but I don't think anyone should ever take it. Because in what situation would you need to run this fast? It'll put you away from your party, which is not where you want to be, ever. And so, yeah, don't do that. Because you're the squishiest marshal. So don't do that. Maybe if you're an Animal Instinct Barbarian, that wouldn't be bad, but the number of times where you're going to be separated by your party so much that you need to just bolt straight towards them, it's probably going to be really few and far in between to spend a level 10 friggin' feat. Great Cleave. Your Fury carries your weapon through multiple foes. When you cleave, if your strike also kills or knocks the target unconscious, you can continue to make melee strikes until you make a strike that doesn't kill or knock a creature unconscious, or until there are no creatures adjacent to the most recent creature you attacked while cleaving. Whichever comes first. So, I'm not even sure if this weapon exists in the game, but get a reach weapon that has sweep on it and walk up to rank and file troops and then just cleave through all of them. You hit the first guy, and then the guy behind him, and then the second guy, and the guy behind him, and then the third guy, and then the guy behind him, and you just angle your cleavageness through them so you hit all of these guys. That won't ever work. You won't ever come across that situation, but in the perfect storm, this is glorious. You might actually find semi-decent use of it too, so it's not a terrible feat, but probably not going to get a lot of use out of it. But it's still really cool. Impressive Landing. You fall at least 10 feet or land on a solid surface. You slam into the ground, shattering it around you. Treat the fall as 10 feet shorter. That's decent right there. You land on your feet. That's awesome. It just says you land on your feet. No matter how far you fall, you always land on your feet. That's big. That's big. All adjacent spaces become difficult terrain. And creatures in those spaces, when you land, take 5 bludgeoning damage and are flat-footed until the start of their next turn. Wow. There's a lot of little things here. As just a fall reducer, this is pretty decent as a reaction. It's a little bit high in level, but you could jump out of a flying thing, like off of dragon's back or off of a, hot air balloon or whatever, and still you're going to take a ton of damage, but you land on your feet, which is awesome. All adjacent spaces become difficult terrain, which will fuck you in a moment, because you're going to have to get through that difficult terrain to get out of the circle you made. You basically make a little hole for yourself. Enemies take 5 damage, which at this level is fucking nothing. Like, literally, it's nothing. Stuff's going to have well over 100 damage at this point. Well over 100 health at this point. Probably like 120 to 160 health. So 5 is going to be nothing. And flat-footed until the start of their next turn, like, that all depends how many actions did you use to get there. If you jumped, then that's 1 action. You land, use your reaction, then you get 2 actions to make use of that flat-footed. Otherwise, you might end up with none because you used 2 actions before you jumped off. Who knows? But all in all, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. The problem with this, I think, if you were trying to make the most use out of this, there's only 2 ways to do that. 1, jump up onto, medium small objects like houses and stuff, because you have to fall at least 10 feet. So you got to be 15 feet up. But make a habit of jumping off from tall objects, and you'll be good. But if you were trying to do that a lot, you would probably also take catfall, you would think, and that would just negate a lot of that. It could also stack with it and make it even better. So if you take a little bit of acrobatics to just get a little bit of catfall, then I think by the way of those wordings, they might stack together because it's just 5 feet shorter. And then catfall does literally the same thing, another X feet shorter. But I guess you could read that as overlapping effects so that they wouldn't stack. So yeah. If you could, angle jump onto tall objects and then bounce off them, this would be fantastic. But since you can't really do that, it'd be very hard to use. Knockback. Your last action was a successful strike. The weight of your swing drives the enemy back. You push enemy 5 feet back as if you had shoved them. And you can follow them. This feels like a level 2 feat to me. It does so little. I mean, it's basically a monster action. You hit, and then you spend an action to auto push. It's not bad, but shove is the weakest thing you can do. So, especially as a free action. I would say the disarming one is probably better than this, just because you could stack disarm up to maybe get it to actually do what it's supposed to do. Whereas this is just it's all right to push an enemy back, get them off your squishies and stuff, but by this level, it's going to start getting harder and harder to successfully do that sort of thing. Overpowering charge. You have to have barreling charge for this. So it's a better version of that. You trample your foes as you charge past them. When you use barreling charge and successfully move through a creature's space, that creature takes bludgeoning damage equal to your strength modifier. And double on a crit. And crit also flat-foots them. This is really thematic. And if you're somehow managing to get good use out of barreling charge, I would say take this. But I don't know. I don't see any of the barbarians I would make as using this. Resounding blow. You're wielding a melee weapon that deals bludgeoning damage. You strike your enemy in the head with such force that their ears ring. Make a melee strike. If the strike hits and deals damage, the target is deafened until the start of your next turn. Like, deafened isn't a fantastic condition, so I would say probably don't take this. Yeah. It's one of those, if you can find a good use for it, then by all means, it's probably great for you. But as general use, I don't think it's a very good general use ability. Which it's nice that we have niche abilities that, hey, if you can find good use for this, then yeah, it'll be good for you. Silencing Strike. A quick strike to the face or mouth silences your opponent. Make a melee strike against a foe. The foe must succeed at a fortitude save against your class DC. If they succeed, they're unaffected. Wow. If they succeed, they're unaffected. Not even crit. Just regular succeed against your class DC fortitude. That is crazy easy. So 75% of the time, this is going to do nothing. Failure, target is dazed and can barely vocalize. It's stunned 1, and its speech is raspy and hard to understand. It must succeed at a DC 11 flat check to use logistics actions or supply verbal spell casting. Crit fail as fail, but the creature is stunned 3 instead of stunned 1. I don't know, it's good. It's got incapacitation, which sucks ass. So, stunned 1 is pretty decent, but you're rarely, if ever, going to get that. But at least you're getting strike on it as well, so I mean, it's not bad. Good to have in your pocket for whenever you're going against casters. And since a lot of monster casters are brutal in melee and able to cast ridiculous spells, might not be bad to just pick that up just because. Tangle of Battle. You critically hit an adjacent enemy. Your incredibly vicious strike pulls you right in close, giving you the opportunity to grab your foe. Attempt to grapple the triggering enemy. This irritates me, because I think it's... Is it this one? Or maybe this? Yeah. So, I mean, I guess this is just an additional way to try and grab if you're making a grab build. But you have to critically hit something that is adjacent to you. Not even within your reach. It has to be adjacent to you. And you only spend your reaction to attempt a grapple. Like, that's pretty bad. Like, crits aren't all that common, and it's just to attempt. I don't know. It feels like it's got two barriers of entry that are pretty damn high, just to get something you want to constantly work. Terrifying Howl. You have to have Intimidating Glare. You unleash a Terrifying Howl. Attempt Intimidate checks to demoralize each enemy within 30 feet. Regardless of the results of your checks, each creature is then temporarily immune to Terrifying Howl for 1 minute. Now, this was in the CRB. When this came out, this ability was pretty trash, because you're spending one action, which is great, to make an Intimidate check against enemies within 30 feet. So it basically means instead of just using Demoralize against one enemy within 30 feet, you're using it against all of them. Which is, hey, that's a fantastic buff. The problem is, every creature is going to reduce their frightened at the beginning of their turn, So frightening multiple creatures and then making them immune to that frightened generally is the worst thing you can do. But we have since got an item in the game that fixes that problem. The Dread Rune. You want at least one of these in every group. Because you also want to have at least one person in your group who specializes in intimidation. And it makes it so that all enemies who can see you within, 30 feet, I think? So within your demoralize range, has to succeed at a set check. It doesn't scale with your level, which sucks. All items that have set DCs suck ass because of that, because it's so dumb. Another just game world system problem. But they have to succeed a check that is, when you first get the rune, it's actually fairly difficult to succeed at that check. Most things will need like a 15 or above or something. But then, every level it goes down and down and down. But it makes it so that if they don't succeed this check, they do not reduce their frightened value. So that makes area of effect frightens so much better because you can keep them on enemies. So as long as you get a Dread Rune at some point, Terrifying Howl is good stuff. Super good stuff. Dragon's Rage Wings. Dragon Instinct. You sprout wings and you get fly speed equal to your land speed. If you're flying when your rage ends, you start to fall, but the transformation only completes at the last moment, so you take no damage from the fall and land standing up. This is just amazing. Just fantastic. You can start flying at level 12. Only when you're raging, which sucks, so you can't use it to actually do much of anything, really. But it's earlier than most people get wings. Embrace the pain. A creature damages you with a melee attack. Ignoring your pain, you reach out and grab the creature or weapon that caused you harm. Attempt an athletics check to grapple the triggering creature or to disarm the creature of the triggering weapon. Like, Barbarian has a surprisingly large amount of reactions, and they're all so very niche that it's all like, you don't have room for these. You just don't have room for this stuff. It's just, I don't know. They're just a little too niche to fit all of these things that you're rarely ever going to use into your thing. I mean, getting hit and then grappling something, this is a lot better than like the Tangle Battle. This actually works. But I think if you're trying to make a grapple build, the next feat is going to be better. Because this is just attempt. Furious Grab. Your last action was a successful strike, and either you have a hand free or your strike used a grapple weapon. You grab your foe while it's distracted by your attack. The foe you hit becomes grabbed as if you had succeeded at an athletics check to grapple the foe. This is just infinitely better than all of those other grab abilities. Because it's automatic. You just have to successfully hit something, and then you auto-grab them. It's stupid good. You could easily make a turn routine of Strike, Furious Grapple, and Thrash. And then if they don't get out of your grab the next turn, you can just strike, thrash. You want to strike them with your weapon if possible because it'll just do more damage. But then the 2 thrashes don't suffer the -5 multiple attack penalty. You're just doing damage unless they critically succeed, which sadly is not entirely dislikely. But still, best case scenario, it's good time. Predator's Pounce for Animal Instinct. You are unarmored or wearing light armor. You close the distance to your prey in a blur, pouncing on a creature before it can react. You stride up to your speed and make a strike at the end of your movement. This is basically a animal instinct specific high level version of the original charge feat. Except it only costs 1 action instead of 2. It's stupid good. This is friggin' amazing. It's like, hey, that ability that you've been spending 2 actions on all the time. It's like, oh, well, these guys can do it for 1 now. Yeah, why would you ever not want that? Spirit's Wrath for Spirit Instinct. You call forth an ephemeral apparition, typically the ghost of an ancestor or nature spirit, which takes the form of a wisp. The spirit wisp makes a melee wisp rush unarmed attack against an enemy within 120 feet of you. The wisp attack modifier is equal to your proficiency bonus for martial weapons plus your strength modifier plus 2 item bonus, and it applies the same circumstance and status bonuses and penalties that you have. Holy shit. It's a lot of words to just say it uses your attack bonus. It doesn't exactly, which is the problem. On a hit, the wisp deals equal to 4d8 plus your constitution modifier. That's weird. The damage is your choice of negative or positive. You don't apply your rage damage or your bonus web spec, but circumstance and status bonuses do affect it. If your wisp strike is a critical hit, the target becomes frightened 1. This attack uses and counts towards your multiple attack penalty. Okay, it's a ranged attack that does lower amounts of damage, and the plus to hit doesn't scale quite as well as your normal stuff. But 120 feet ranged attack, like, this fixes one of the biggest problems barbarians have with not being able to hit at range. Sucks that it's spirit only, because spirit's not that great. But overall, probably pretty decent to have that. Sunder Spell, Superstition. You draw upon the Superstitious Fury to destroy a spell. Make a strike with a melee weapon or an unarmed attack against a creature, object, or a spell manifestation, such as the wall created by the Wall of Fire or the Guardian from Spirit Guardian. If your strike hits, you can attempt to counteract a single spell or magical effect on the target. Your counteract level for the attempt is equal to half your level rounded up, and you use the result of your attack roll for the counteract check. That's actually pretty fucking good. Counteracting is sort of hard because you have to spend like top level slots to reliably counter stuff. This just gives you a top level counteract chance for fucking free. Except for a lot of them is you're attacking the spell, which is kind of weird. Whether or not you succeed, the target becomes temporarily immune to your Sunder spell for... Holy shit. If you're targeting something that doesn't have an AC listed, its AC is usually 10 against this strike for targets that are very easy to hit, like a wall, or a different AC determined by the GM. You get 1 chance to undo a spell with a modest chance of success. So that's all right. Titan stature. You have to have giant stature. You grow even larger. When you use giant stature, you can instead become huge. That's it. You just get bigger. This makes going into smaller areas difficult, but it only affects you while you're raging, so it's just good. There's no downsides to it. You already have that downside. So, just get some more reach. Unbalancing Sweep. Open and Flourish. Like, as an open, I vaguely understand why that's there. Because if you were hasted, you could make a strike first. But there are no flourishes you can do, as far as I know, with a 3-action ability. It might just be future-proofing in case there's a reaction flourish or something, but I don't think any of those exist in the game. Anyhow, You make a great sweep about yourself, knocking creatures off their feet and away from you. Choose up to 3 adjacent foes and choose whether to shove or trip all 3 of them. Whichever of the 2 options you choose, roll a separate athletics check against each foe, performing the same action against each. Each attempt counts towards your multiple attack, but you don't get the penalty until after you're done. I have very mixed feelings about this. 3 actions to make 3 trip attempts. But they're all at the same trip value. Or, well, they're not getting multiple attack penalty, which is good. I'm just not sure it's great enough. Like, this sort of feels more like a level 6 or level 8 feat to me. I don't know. But it's alright. If that's, like, tripping is always good. But you're doing 0 damage unless you critically trip them for tiny amounts of damage. And then, what is this actually achieving? You're spending 3 actions to trip 3 opponents, costing them 3 actions. You're not gaining anything out of this. You'll be able to attack one of them with attack of opportunity if you took it. But, like, that's, you're not really getting a lot for what you're giving. You're giving, it's a 1-for-1. And you'd hope at this level you would be getting more bang for your buck. That's all. Awesome, Blue. Concentrate, so that's a problem. Your attacks are so powerful they can flatten your opponents. When you use knockback, you can attempt an athletics check against your target's fortitude DC. Crit success, you gain the critical success effect of a shove, then the critical success of a trip. Well, that's pretty cool. Success, you gain the success of a shove, and then success effect of a trip. Alright, so you knock somebody back, and then they fall over. That's really good, but at 14th level, I'm not sure if it's good enough. This is basically the bog standard kind of stuff you see in action movies where, you know, some people are fighting, blah, 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 and then they do the stupid, you know, gut kick and it knocks somebody back, and then they trip over something and fall down or whatever. You know, that's sort of standard action movie choreography, and to need a 14th level feat just to do that sort of feels, I don't know, inappropriate. It's not bad. It's just not, I don't know, not fantastic. Giant's Lunge. For giant instinct only. You extend your body and prepare to attack foes outside your normal reach until your rage ends. All your melee weapons and unarmed attacks gain reach 10. This doesn't increase the reach of any weapon or unarmed attack that already has the reach trait, but it does combine with abilities that increase your reach due to increase in size, such as giant stature. I'm not sure what this does. Weird to say after just reading that, but the tags are Barbarian, Concentrate, Instinct, and Rage. None of those are a stance. So you're spending 1 action to what? It also doesn't have the Morph trait, so you're not growing your arms longer. But that's basically what it's suggesting, is that you spend an action and you gain an additional... not additional 10 reach, you gain reach 10. It basically sets the standard reach of all your weapons and stuff at 10 before your size increases it. It's really weird. Like, it definitely needs to be errated. I'm surprised it hasn't been yet. It needs the morph trait. Because you're changing your reach. That's like your arms are growing longer. To me, that's what it sounds like you're doing. You're Slender-Manning your arms to hit things for the duration of your rage. It's very weird. Impaling Thrust. You are wielding a melee weapon that deals piercing damage. You impale your enemy and hold them in place with your weapon. Make a melee strike with the required weapon. If the strike hits and deals damage, your target is grabbed until they successfully escape. You attack with the required weapon, or you release the required weapon, whichever comes first. When the target is no longer grabbed, they take persistent bleed damage equal to the number of weapon damage dice. This is basically the sort of thing that you could easily allow anybody to do because it's thematic as fuck with a spear or like a barbed spear or some sort of really vicious impaling weapon. But it's nice to have a feat that just says, hey, you can do this thing with any piercing weapon. If you're using weapons and trying to make a grab build for, thrash and that sort of stuff, this is really good. But it sucks that it doesn't come online till level 14. But it's good. Sunder Enchantment. Upgrade to Sunder Spell. You can focus your super system to break the magic of an item. In addition to destroying freestanding spells and those of active on creatures, when you sunder a spell, you can instead attempt to counteract either an unattended magic item or one of your target's magic items. If your counterattack succeeds, the item becomes mundane item of its type for 10 minutes. And if you target an artifact, an intelligent item, or a specifically powerful item, your counteract attempt automatically fails. Sure. That's kind of vicious. You basically turn people's magic items off. But that only works if you're fighting people who have magic items, which a lot of monsters don't. So maybe not anywhere near as useful as it otherwise could be. If you're in a campaign that you know that's what you're doing, is you're fighting against other people who have magic items, then super useful. Otherwise, probably barely ever use it. Vengeful Strike. Prerequisites, the thing you should never take. You're under the effects of this thing that makes you want to die. Trigger, a creature within your reach succeeds or critically succeeds at an attack against you, which they will because you've made it easier for them to hit you. When stuck by an enemy, you respond in turn. Make a melee strike against the triggering creature. This strike doesn't count towards your multiple attack penalty, and your multiple attack penalty doesn't... Well, of course not. It's a reaction. This is still dog shit because the original ability is absolute garbage. I would say if this ability allowed you to... If this was a free action reaction, this would be good. And it would actually make Come and Get Me not be absolute shit. But as it stands, you just get a reaction when something critically hits you. Actually, no. Succeeds or critically succeeds. You get to a counterattack when something hits you. If Vengeful Strike was in place of Come and Get Me, and it's just like, oh, you get hit and you counterattack, that would be a really cool ability. But both of these together suck. Now I understand just having a counteract that triggers on anything would be way too good. Swashbucklers don't get that until very high level with very specific builds. And their damage is a lot lower than barbarians, but still, just everything that this is doing is bad. If you get Vengeful Strike, then Come and Get Me with Vengeful Strike will be decent in one-on-one fights. But other than that, hot garbage. Whirlwind, you attack everything around you. You attack everything within your reach. And don't get a penalty on any of the attacks until you're done. Like, fairly hard to set up for, but awesome for both of those classes when you can do them. Definitely take it. There's no reason not to have it, really, because whenever you can use it, it's awesome. I mean, spreading the damage out is probably not all that fantastic, but, you know, if you're in a group that has spellcasters that are doing damage, then this will help kill multiple troops. I mean, multiple enemies. But, you know, you got to use it right. And it's not great. It's just good. Because spreading your damage out is kind of generally a bad idea. Collateral Thrash. You have to have Thrash. When you thrash a grabbed foe, you smack that foe into another nearby. Another foe adjacent to the grabbed foe also takes your thrash damage with a basic reflex save against your class DC. Now, Collateral Thrash is better than Thrash because Thrash is a fortitude save, which most, if not all monsters, have really good fortitude. This one is a reflex save, and it's also doubling your damage. One action and you hit 2 enemies for your strength and rage damage. Like, that's not bad. And imagine that with Impaling Strike. You friggin' stab somebody on your weapon and then fucking smash them into one of their allies. Not only is that thematically awesome, this just ups the amount of damage you're doing with a single action. It's great. Dragon Transformation. Dragon Instinct and Dragon Rage Wings. So you have to take the wings. You transform into a ferocious large dragon, gaining the effects of the 6th level dragon form, except that you use your own AC and attack modifier. You also apply your extra damage from rage. The action to dismiss the transformation gains the rage trait. At 18th level, you gain a plus 20-foot status bonus to speed. Your damage bonus with dragon strikes increases to plus 12, and you gain a plus 14 bonus to your breath weapon damage. That's basically what the higher upcasting dragon form does for you. So I don't know why they didn't just say you get an 8th level dragon form instead of 6th. There must be something in there that changes that you don't get. But this is a hell of a lot better than the animal one, because animal forms don't scale up very well. Not that it really matters, because you're not using any of those stats. But dragon form is awesome because it gives you the most amount of speed in the game. 120 foot fly speed, and then at 18th level it goes up. The problem is, you have to do this while raging. So, fly speed is going to be awesome, but it's not going to be, nearly as great as a druid transforming to fly around all the time. But, awesome ability. Because it also gives you the breath weapon, which is half decent. It's better than yours. Furious Vengeance for Fury. This is the first feat Fury Instinct gets. Frickin' level 16. Trigger. An enemy within your melee reach critically hits you with a melee strike. Your enemy's blows fuels your rage and provokes your immediate retaliation. You make a melee strike against the triggering enemy. Hey, that's cool. You get hit, and you hit back. That's just fantastic. They have to crit you, which sucks. And it's level 16, which double sucks. And you have to be Fury, which triple sucks. So you should never use this, because you should never be this to get this. Unless you're in the one specific campaign where you're fighting only humanoids. And then definitely get this. Like 100% get this. Penetrating projectile. You are wielding a ranged or thrown weapon that deals piercing damage. So a javelin. I think javelins might be the only ranged throw piercing weapons. Your projectiles are unhindered by flesh and bone. Make a ranged strike against each creature in a 30-foot line. These attacks ignore lesser cover, cover, and greater cover granted by creatures. Roll damage only once and apply it to each creature you hit. Each attack counts towards your multiple attack value, but don't do it until you're all done. This is cool. It turns your thrown weapon into a line attack. Like, that's just fucking awesome. 2 actions instead of 1 for a single attack with the chance of hitting multiple things. Here's the problem. Lines in Pathfinder 2 generally suck. Unless your GM is allowing you just to use a rope, like a string or whatever. And if you can connect that string to 3 different points, you can do it. Otherwise, lines suck a lot. So this is really cool thematically. The thing it does is cool, but because of the underlying rules of the system, you probably won't get much use out of this, which I hate. I hate stuff that's like that. Reckless abandon. Your turn begins and you are at half or fewer hit points. Your blood boils on you when you take a beating, and you throw caution to the wind to finish the fight. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus to attack rolls, -2 to AC, and -1 to saves. These bonuses and penalties last until your rage ends or until you are above half hit points, whichever comes first. This should have been what Come and Get Me was. That's all I have to say about that. Like, that's what that should have been. You get a +2 to hit, and all your defenses go down. That's, yeah. It fully engages in rocket tag mode. You become extremely squishy, but you're gonna smash the shit out of stuff. Shattering blows. Your forceful blows shatter objects with ease. While you are raging, your melee strikes ignore 5 points of an object's hardness. If you have the Devastator class feature, you instead ignore 10. That's not just good against objects. That also applies to living objects like animated armor or statues or, you know, golems and that sort of stuff that have item armor. Structure armor, whatever it's called. So this is pretty good. It comes online rather late, but it's pretty good. Brutal criticals. Your critical hits are particularly devastating. On a critical hit with a melee strike, add 1 extra damage die. This is in addition to any you get from deadly or fatal. The target also takes persistent bleed damage equal to 2 damage dice. Now, this is kind of ridiculous. It gives you 1 extra damage die, which is going to be a D10 or a D12 on a critical, which is great. But then the enemy also bleeds for 2d10 or 2d12, depending on what you're using. That is some of the highest dice for bleed in the game. It is crazy. Perfect clarity. You fail or critically fail an attack roll or will save. You burn out all of your rage to ensure that your attack lands or your mind remains free. Reroll the triggering attack roll or will save with a +2 bonus. Use the better result. Better. See? Don't say worse, or don't even say second. Use better, always. And resolve the effect. You then immediately stop raging. At this level, stop raging only means you have to spend the next turn not raging and then you can rage again, which is still like 20 to 24% of a battle, but might not be bad. It's an option you have, and a decent option. If you just really need to hit or really need to do the will save, then yeah, it can be a good option. Vicious Evisceration. You make a vicious attack that maims your enemy. Make a melee strike. If the strike hits and deals damage, the target is drained 1 or drained 2 on a critical success. So that means you hit something and then you also do its level in damage. Drained 1 lowers your current and maximum hit points by your level. So this gives you at least 18 extra damage against on-level opponents, or 36 damage on a crit. I mean, this is just bonus damage. It's just bonus damage. Drain doesn't stack, so it's only once per target you do this bonus damage. But I mean, you know, it's probably good to do this as your second attack. So your whole turn would be strike and then vicious evisceration. Because it's already been mathed out by a bunch of different people that striking twice is the highest amount of damage, consistent damage you can do, instead of any 2 action attacks in the game. So it's always good to keep that in mind. And then on to your capstone abilities. Your highest level capabilities. All your level 20 feats. Annihilation Swing. You have learned from the brute destruction power of Zulgas and their kind. You make a melee strike that ignores any resistances the foe has. If you target a solid, unattended object or surface within your strike, you might automatically destroy it without an attack roll. If you target any object or surface that has hardness 20 or less that isn't magic item or effects of a spell, you destroy it. If the target object or surface is magic or the effect of a spell, you attempt to counteract it using your counteract bonus with the strike for the counteract check. So this does the same. This also overwrites all of that superstitious attacks. On a successful counteract check, you destroy the object or surface unless it has hardness greater than 20, is an artifact or similar difficult to destroy. You destroy up to 5-foot cube of an object or surface larger than medium. So it's mostly against solid walls, like Wall of Stone. And honestly, you only destroy a 5-foot section. That's pretty terrible. 2 action ability to hit a wall of stone or whatever. I mean, I guess it would also work on a wall of force and a force cage. So that's pretty good. And all you would need is a 5-foot opening for those things. So that's decent. It does what it says it does. It breaks shit. But is that really what you want your level 20 ability to be? Is just you're good at breaking stuff? I don't know. Contagious Rageous. You have to have Share Rage. You can drive your allies into a frenzy, granting them incredible benefits. You can ignore the requirements on Share Rage, using it multiple times in a rage. Allies affected by Share Rage who accept your anathema for the duration of the rage gain your Instinct ability and the specialization ability it gains from weapon spec, but not greater weapon spec. So that means it gains the initial damage boost that most of the raid instinct abilities have, and the first specialization bonus. So that generally will put it somewhere between +6 and +8 damage. I mean, that's decent. But is it still, like, capstone worthy? How many people in your party are going to benefit from a +6 to +8 physical weapon damage bonus? One, probably. Maybe two? So I don't know. This is the AP version of this ability before it became a actual ability. So we'll skip that one. They're almost identical. Quaking Stomp. Once per 10 minutes. You stomp the ground with such force that it creates a minor earthquake with the effects of the earthquake spell. So not minor earthquake, a literal earthquake from the earthquake spell. Good stuff. Earthquake is a really cool spell. This is a really cool ability. I think it's perhaps not capstone worthy. I think all martial characters should have stuff like this at much lower levels. Like, all throughout their stuff, they should have spell-like abilities that they can pick up, because that's just cool as fuck. We're sort of going to be getting that with the Elementalist. Whatever that class is called, I can't even remember right now. I just did a video on it, and I can't even remember what the hell it was called now. I didn't play first edition Pathfinder, so the class doesn't really resonate with me. So I don't remember it. But this is a really cool ability. But this is kind of where it's at. You have become a brutal, unstoppable force of nature, able to shrug off mortal wounds with ease. You gain resistance equal to 3 plus your Constitution modifier to all damage. And your resistance from raging increases to 8 plus your Constitution modifier. In addition, if you are reduced to 0 hit points while raging, you can end your rage as a reaction to stay at 1 hit point. If you do, you become wounded 2 and increase your wounded condition by 2 if you are already wounded. Damage resist. Lots of damage resist. That's good stuff. Damage resist all is one of the best things you can get. Now, if you've got a champion in your group, you might not need this so much, because you're going to be getting lots of resist all anyhow. And then you can choose this to be awesome. Whirlwind Toss, another uncommon option from an AP. You have to have Collateral Thrash. You have a foe grabbed. You whirl a foe to smash into all nearby creatures before throwing them far away, in imitation of the techniques of your rival Rantau. So this might be... no, it's from an AP 168. I don't know what that is. That might be Fist of the Phoenix, but I don't remember it. But we didn't have a barbarian in our group, so... You thrash. During this thrash, your collateral thrash feat applies to all foes adjacent to you. You can then throw the grabbed creature 10 feet where they fall prone. If the foe you choose for collateral thrash is also adjacent to you, they attempt only one save and take the damage only once. Huh. So that means you could I don't know. That makes me think of one thing, but I don't think that's actually what that's saying, is that you could grab somebody, collateral thrash them, and into everyone else. Oh, that might be because collateral thrash affects all enemies around the enemy you are grabbing. So if an enemy is adjacent to that enemy you are grabbing and adjacent to you, they don't take the damage twice. I think that's what that's supposed to mean, which just makes sense. That's a really, really cool ability. Again, not sure it's 20th level good, but it's super cool. And that is Barbarians in a nutshell. You are very good at damage, have lots of options to bring the pain, have a few really good defensive options, and you can actually choose an entire instinct that you could build up to be very defensive while still doing greater than most other martials in damage. So, yeah. Definitely one of the core classes that are just works brilliantly out of the box, where they're a lot of the new classes since APG are not nearly as effective at doing the thing that they're supposed to do, even in the best circumstances, which is irritating. But if you want to just beat the ever-loving crap out of stuff, go Barbarian and smash. Lots of smash. And that's it for now. Have a great evening.